But can you tell me the top 2 or 3 things that are actually wrong with Italian coffee? And look, I'm setting myself up for they're gonna cut my head off.
Yeah, they're gonna cut my head off as well.
No, they won't. But for them, I'm a traitor or something like that,
Yeah.
But I'm searching for the truth.
Being in an Italian coffee shop, I can stand there for hours just watching, It's beautiful. The problem is it's too cheap. And because of that, you have terrible beans and you're kind of stuck in the old ways with roasting as well. So very often it's not roasted very well.
We have a coffee expert coming in today. Now, I can get really nerdy about some things, but I heard this guy is like next level. He knows everything about coffee. Actually, here he is. Incoming.
Hey!
Ciao, Tim. How are you, man?
Good to see you.
DayOff was born from the simple idea of a bar conversation during a day off, with the goal to understand great people, the choices they've made, and their mindset. And with this approach, we are able to split the person from the personality. If you do enjoy the work we're doing here, hit the subscribe button and become part of the DayOff podcast community. Right, so this episode with a coffee legend known as Tim Wendelboe is going to make a lot of coffee lovers happy, but probably is going to make some Italians very unhappy. All right? I'm not going to say anything anymore. Just watch the episode. Tim, welcome to your day off.
Thank you. I never have a day off, by the way.
You never do, huh?
Always work every day.
Well, you're a business owner,
Yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah.
That's yeah. I believe there are certain benefits of being a business owner. One of them is that you get to do things the way you want,
Yeah.
but there are also some dark sides to it.
There you have to do a lot of things you don't want to do. But no, most days I love what I do, but I have some days off, but there's always some emails or something every day. So, but I enjoy it, so it doesn't really bother me at all.
And I want to understand also that side of you. I find you a very interesting personality. But let's start with this.
Yep.
About 7 years ago, I arrived in Norway for the very first time, and I heard about your specialty coffee shop. Now, as an Italian, we grow up thinking that the best coffee is only in Italy, and I was very skeptic. I was like, Norwegians making coffee? Come on. Then I came to your shop. I had a coffee, and I had, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. I had the best coffee I've ever had in my life.
No, that's nice to hear.
Through that. But then the hard part was to go back home to Italy, to Napoli, and try to explain that to my friends. Nobody ever believes me, ever.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's because there are a lot of misconceptions about coffee. I wanted to ask you to begin with, what is the biggest or one of the biggest misconception about coffee out there?
Well, maybe the biggest one is that Italians know how to make good coffee.
Okay.
Which, of course, some Italians do, but not every single one. I love going to Italy to drink coffee, but for me, it's a different culture. It's a different beverage than what I think about when I drink coffee. Of course, Norway is a filter coffee country. Italy is a espresso country. So I think when you say it like that, actually one of the biggest misconceptions is that in Italy they have great coffee. And I've been to Italy many times. I love being there. I have had a few cups of great coffee, but that's from the very few shops that actually know what they're doing and are really working on quality. Unfortunately, the culture in Italy has been that you are expected not to pay more than €1 for an espresso while you stand in the bar. And, cost of labor, cost of rent, cost of
So
electricity.
there is an economic factor there as well.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's the biggest factor of why the Italian coffee quality has declined over the last 10, 20, 30 years. It's because
So
coffee...
it was better before.
Maybe, because it was more affordable to buy better quality coffee. I remember I went to a coffee importer in Trieste, Vincenzo Sandali, and he was kind of
Your
disappointed.
Italian accent is spot on, by the way.
Okay. He was quite disappointed because he had a family company that had been importing coffee for many years to Italy. and he was a little disappointed that the quality every year went down. And he told me one of the reasons was you're expected to not charge more than €1 at the bar for the espresso. If you have a coffee shop, of course, it's hard to make money when you sell a beverage for €1. So you expect to get a free machine, free cups, free sugar, free umbrellas, free napkins, free everything from the coffee supplier in order to sell their coffee. And the coffee supplier, of course, say yes to that, so they can sell more coffee. But in order for them to make money, they have to buy cheaper coffee. So you end up with buying lower quality Arabica, more Robusta. I remember Vincenzo told me that the amount of Robusta had increased a lot compared to previous decades.
There is definitely an economic factor.
Yeah.
There is a cultural factor there, and I believe that the cultural factor it's even as even a bigger impact than the economical factor. I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I can speak for my region, all right? I can tell you people who have been making coffee, they think they know it all.
Yeah.
They think they don't do anything wrong, and also they follow a very weird, which, and I don't know you personally, but I know you will not agree with this. They follow this very weird. They have this very weird approach, which is, well, we've been making coffee like this for X number of years. Everybody loves it,
Yeah.
therefore it works.
Yeah.
And they have this misconception that just because we sell so many coffees a day and everybody loves it, then it must be good.
Yeah. I have an analogy for that, and that's the most sold pizza in Norway is the frozen pizza, Pizza Grandiosa.
That's right.
And just because it sells a lot, it doesn't mean that it's a great pizza.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm pretty sure that if you compare that to some of the best pizza I've had in my life has been in Naples or Napoli.
You've been to Napoli.
Yeah.
Did you get your wallet stolen?
No, actually not.
But then you should go back and try the full experience.
No, but I had some great pizza there. And, if you compare that to the Pizza Grandiosa, it's just completely different products, And
Yeah, 100%. I don't even know why they call it pizza.
No,
Grandiosa. Grandiosa is basically a frozen biscuit with tomato sauce on top.
Yeah. And some
Pizza is something else.
undefinable meat stuff on. Yeah.
Undefinable is the keyword. Very good, very good. No, but what's your take on this concept? Because I think as a culture, as humans, we should be able to move on, right, and improve everything, right? But that mentality sometimes doesn't allow us to move on. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you're stuck in your own bubble.
Yeah, but it's happening. It's definitely happening. I have a friend, Francesco Senapo, in Florence. He has, I think, 4 coffee shops now, and he's been very vocal about this problem that they have in Italy, that they're kind of stuck in their old ways. There are other, of course, roasters and coffee shops in Italy as well who are really fighting for showing Italians how good coffee can actually be. It doesn't mean that you have to like it, because a coffee can be acidic, it can be floral, it can be fruity, and if you fell in love with coffee because of the flavors of Robusta, for instance, that's kind of what you're normally searching for, and maybe a very fruity or floral, high acidity, light-bodied Arabica coffee will not be your thing, and that's okay, but there is definitely a measurable thing, whether it's good or bad quality, both in terms of the raw material, how it's roasted, the preparation can be, objectively defined as good or bad quality.
Beautiful.
And,
This is music to my ears. But
You
basically,
can like it or not,
that's right. That's right. And what you're saying, I think you're saying something very important, which is you have to be able to differentiate a subjective opinion, a subjective experience to objective quality.
Yeah.
Right? Because quality, people think it's subjective. It's not. Quality is indeed objective because it's measurable. Right? Then your subjective experience is not irrelevant, right? But in the pursuit of professional truth, I believe measurable objective quality should be the primary thing.
Yeah.
Would you agree with this statement?
For sure, 100%. And we have a lot of this in coffee. The coffee industry is quite young, I would say, although we've had coffee for centuries. the kind of quality aspect of coffee industry, what they call specialty coffee. I don't really like to use that term, but um,
Why?
because
It's
Nespresso uses
abused.
the same term. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So it doesn't really mean anything. It's really difficult to understand what it's about. But if you're into high quality coffee, there's a lot of new ideas of what is quality. For instance, today, high coffees that are very heavily processed is very kind of trendy, and for me, they actually are pretty poor quality. And you can actually kind of tell that because, for instance, when you grade the green coffee, like the unroasted coffee, normally it goes through a sorting machine to remove defects. And if you put some of these coffees through that machine, all of the beans would be removed because they're all defects. defined
Seriously.
defined by the kind of old school people like me, that this is a defect bean. And of course, defect for me is high quality for someone else. So, but you can actually
But so that's not very objective then. Or
that's not very objective, but still, you can objectively say that the bean itself is lower quality because it will have much shorter shelf life, for instance. The cell structure might be broken down. A lot of the lipids that make the flavor of the coffee might be already consumed by
when you say
bacteria.
the cell structure, you're talking about the fibers,
Yeah,
right?
of the
Within the
bean.
bean.
Yeah. So, I mean, so it really depends. Like, you kind of have to define quality before you can say whether it's good or bad.
And you also need to be ego free.
Yeah, well, that's difficult in coffee.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
Before we talk about you, because I want to understand a bit more about you, can you tell me the difference between Arabica and Robusta?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty simple. In the coffee kind of kingdom, in the plant kingdom, there are around 130 different species of coffee. One is Arabica, and another one is 𝒟𝒏𝓎𝗢, and Robusta is a kind of variety of 𝒟𝒏𝓎. So it is the same difference as apple and pear. I mean, they are both fruits. They're pretty similar, but they are different. Yeah. So that's kind of the difference. And they have, for instance, if you have a Robusta tree, it needs to be cross-pollinated with another tree in order to give fruit with germinated beans inside. And I have, for instance, Eugenoides, which is a different species. I have that in my variety garden on my farm. And a lot of the cherries are empty inside because I don't have enough trees to cross-pollinate, because it needs cross-pollination. With the Arabica, it's self-pollinating. That means it has both the male and female part in the
Right.
flower. So it's you get beans and cherries full of beans on the tree. So
So
yeah.
would it be fair to say that one grows in higher volumes than the other?
Yeah, I mean, Robusta's name is probably because it's more robust. It likes to grow in lower altitudes where it's hotter climates. It has more caffeine, which is one of the plant's ways of kind of, it's like an insect repellent
Right.
because it's a poison.
Right.
And Arabica likes it higher above sea level where it's cooler climates, a little bit less sun, a little bit less rain. Um, like more or less like a person. He
Right.
likes a little bit of sun, but not too much. A little bit of rain, not too much.
I have a nerdy question about that actually. It just came to mind. So with grapes, for example, based on the climates they grow, they can either, so let's say you have a variety which is naturally high in acidity.
Mm.
Based on where it grows, it can either retain that acidity or drop it,
Yeah.
right? And also at the time of when you harvest it.
Yeah.
Is it the same with coffee?
Definitely, yeah.
Same
So
thing.
very good example is Bourbon, which is one of the older varieties or cultivars outside of Ethiopia. And if you grow it in very high altitudes in the right place, it can be like super fruity flavor, high acidity, very complex red fruit flavors, florals. If you grow it in lower altitudes, in Brazil, for instance, it tastes like chocolate and hazelnut.
Right. So the warmer, the darker the flavors that will develop. The warmer the climate,
Very
the
often,
darker.
yeah, very often because the cherries ripen faster, so
Right.
they don't have time on the tree to develop more complex flavors. And also, there's a thing called respiration. So, in very cool climates, the tree will actually produce more sugars in order to protect itself from frost, because the coffee tree cannot tolerate frost. If it has more sugar inside the sap, it lowers the freezing point. So that's one of the kind
Of
of
course.
benefits of it. So
Interesting.
there's many things, that I don't even understand, but it's very kind of common to say that higher grown coffee, which means higher altitude coffee from higher altitudes, is better quality. because it's sweeter, more complex flavors, blah blah blah. But it really depends on the variety of Arabica. I'm talking about Arabica now. For instance, Pacamara is not necessarily a variety that likes it at very high altitudes. For me, the best Pacamaras from Honduras, for instance, is around 1400 meters. And I buy a Pacamara from one farmer that has it planted on 1600 meters, 15 and 14, and the lower part is the best one. And it's the opposite with, for instance, Bourbon. So different varieties, and there are hundreds of different varieties of Arabica, and they all kind of have their special place where they taste fantastic. And it doesn't mean that if you take those seeds that taste fantastic, planted somewhere else, that you will get fantastic results. This is some of the work that I've been doing since
You're talking about
2012.
the concept of terroir.
Yeah. So since 2012, I've been kind of gathering seeds from different places in Central America, distributing them to the farmers that I buy from there. And for instance, we have a Kenyan cultivar or Kenyan variety, SL28. We planted the same seeds in Colombia, 2 farms in Honduras, and 1 in El Salvador. There's 1 farm in Honduras where it tastes phenomenal. Tastes like Kenyan coffee, like really intense blackcurrant flavors. On all the other farms, eh, it's like,
Nee.
doesn't taste great. Tastes like chocolate. So,
But Tim, let me understand a little bit more about you, because you started working with coffee about 25 years ago, 30,
yeah, 1998. So
98.
yeah,
Okay,
26 years.
so almost 30 years ago
Yeah.
now. Wow, that's a long time, man.
Yeah. I'm old.
And you don't look like still a sharp mind,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
good.
So
But I think because of all the caffeine you had in your system,
Maybe.
But listen, I want to understand one thing. Earlier, you were telling me that at the beginning of your career, it was the negative feedback that sort of pushed you to become who you are today.
Yeah.
And now we live in a society where, at least from my point of view, we're trying, or some people are trying to minimize as much as possible the amount of negative feedbacks one can get in order not to offend them or whatever else.
Yeah.
But then I look at a lot of successful people, you included, who have had that kind of background, with a lot of negative experiences and, again, negative feedbacks, and just using them as a fuel
Yeah.
to move on,
Yeah.
right? And become better instead of just crying about it.
Yeah.
Do you think your life would have been, and your career perhaps, and your personality, why not, would have been a little different hadn't you had those negative feedbacks in the past?
I think I would be very, very different, actually.
So it was good for you.
For sure. Uh,
How?
and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily negative feedback, but feedback, honest feedback.
Mm.
Uh, it can be perceived as negative, but normally the sender of the feedback doesn't say it to kind of make you feel bad. They say it because they want something to improve, So a very good example is when I started working in a coffee shop. I didn't really know what to do. I got a 3-hour course from my kind of sensei, I call him now.
Who was it?
Willie Hansen. He's retired now, but he taught me how to make espresso. I had like a 3-hour class.
3-hour crash course.
Yeah, at Solberg and Hansen. They own the coffee shop that I started in,
Right.
in 𝒟𝒶𝓎𝗢. So I went there for like 3 hours. He showed me, how to steam milk and how to tamp and everything. And then I went to the coffee shop, and yeah, we made coffee. And then there would be some people who had maybe been to Italy to drink espresso, or been somewhere else, and they would say, I didn't really enjoy this coffee, or maybe it was this food we served which I didn't even enjoy myself. So it hurt extra, when you get complaints about the food. It's like, I know, I'm so sorry for serving it. I didn't have a choice. I was just working there. So, but they are complaining because they wanted to improve, because they liked the place they go to. And it did improve because I couldn't take it anymore. So I actually had a big fight with the owners, and we changed the pastries, we changed how we, the sandwiches we made and everything. And then customers started getting really happy, which is a great kind of feedback again. But you always want to make it better because you kind of have to develop, I think. Um, so to answer your question, ever since I was a kid, I've always been my dad was quite strict, not very strict, but quite strict, and didn't really. Um, s- when I didn't do well, he didn't say, oh, you did so great, like it would be more like a constructive say, okay, maybe next time we can do like this, or
That's a
uh,
very old school thing, no?
yeah, it's a little bit old school, but I was born in the 70s, so
Do you think we're building a weaker and weaker generation nowadays?
yeah, but I think now maybe we have realized that to do so is not the greatest, to say that you're always good, because if you say to your kid that they're always, oh, you did so well, then maybe it's not the best thing for them to grow. So
Do you have kids yourself?
no, I don't.
No.
But I have a couple of nephews, and
Do they know you're a
nieces.
superstar?
Yeah. They're old enough now. Well, one of them aspires a lot to me, and we have a very kind of normal conversation. I don't try to have like a from above and down conversation or anything. I talk to him like would be my friend or someone like that. And I think they appreciate that. It's not something. I don't try to hide anything or kind of make them feel better than. If I don't like anything, I just say, this wasn't good enough, and yeah.
Makes sense.
If it offends you, it's not really my problem. That's
That's
your problem.
that's
You have to. You can't. I like Ricky Gervais a lot, and
Oh, tell me
he
about it.
has this interview with someone. I don't remember who it was, but he said like you can't really walk through life without being offended. We can't expect
You can't
that to happen.
expect not to be offended.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
walk through life expecting not to be offended.
Exactly.
And also, if something offends you, if the truth offends you, don't change the feeling. Don't change the truth. Change the feeling.
Yeah. Actually, normally when I get the most upset is when people tell me something or complain about something that I already know that, this is not good. And then I might say, okay, maybe we'll kind of look through it. And then someone comments on it and it's like, oh my God, why did I do that? But that's the way I learn. And that's kind of how you make sure that next time you don't do it like that. You make sure that it's great every time.
So, talking about ego, you started in the coffee business in 1999. You said 2000s,
98, yeah.
98. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't start my business then, but I
No,
started
no. You
working
you
in.
you
Yeah.
worked in. You started working in the coffee industry.
Yeah.
Um, and then some years later, not many years later, I guess, you'll tell me when exactly you became a world champion in coffee.
2004.
2004, so not many years later,
No.
right?
But yeah.
Now, I have so many questions about that. Ego.
Yeah.
When you win such an important title, and nowadays, earlier you were telling me there are so many coffee competitions now, so you know, but back in the days, I guess there weren't as many, right?
No.
So if you won a global competition back in the days, it was something.
It was a big thing, yeah.
It was a big
Yeah.
thing. How did you approach winning?
I'll tell you what. I started competing in '99 in the Norwegian Championship, and that same format became the World Championship. So it kind of started in Norway. So in 2000 was the first World Championship. The Norwegian barista was competing back then, Robert Thoresen. He's the owner of Java and Mokka and Kaffa. He won the World Championship, and I mean it was the first World Championship. The format was based on the Norwegian competition, so you can say we had an advantage. But also the Danes and the Swedes, and they had been kind of competing in the same format in their own countries. So the year after, I competed, and I managed to win the Norwegian Championship. Came to the Worlds. I knew I was the best barista there,
Right. Okay.
because I had a big ego, and I didn't win.
You
And
thought you were, or you knew you were?
I kind of thought I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because that's there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
difference there, right? Okay. Okay.
And I didn't win, and I was pretty happy. I came second. I was pretty happy with that. I saw the winner; he was great. I could see that there was a difference in levels. So then I had something to aspire to. I went home, started practicing, won again in 2002. The World Championship was in Oslo. Um, and then I really knew that I was the best. Like, I had the best technique. I had been practicing a lot. I was on another level. I was much faster than the others. I did whatever I thought was, in my head, very professional. And I didn't win again. I came second. And the winner, I couldn't understand why he was winning. He was using illy coffee. He did basically everything wrong. He wasn't very technical, all these kind of things. I'm like, oh my God, how could I not win? And then I realized, I took a little break. I went to Italy actually to learn about coffee roasting and everything, just to like a study trip. Went back home. I talked to one of the judges. He basically told me that my coffee didn't taste good, because I was using pretty bad quality coffee. And also, he told me something that kind of I realized afterwards as well when I watched the videos afterwards of the competition, that I was all about myself. I forgot about the judges and treating them well, giving them a good experience. When you saw the winner, who technically was not the best barista there, he made a dream scenario for the judges. He made it so easy for them to judge. He made them feel good. He served good drinks. It was a good atmosphere, and I was like a machine,
Right.
compared to him.
But that
Because
that
I was all about myself. I was all about like me, 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 me.
right.
And I forgot that hospitality is
It's
about
about other
the
people.
guests. It's not about you. So that really taught me a lesson. And I took a break, trained one of my employees for the next year, and then I came back and then I won. And when I won, I had very little focus on the technical stuff. I was focusing on like making sure the drinks taste good, and also trying to communicate in a relaxed way to the judges all the work that was behind it without kind of teaching them, if you know what I mean. Just, give some small hints, and I talked about many different things, but
How are these competitions structured? So I guess you have a theoretical part as well, or is it only practical? Only
only
practical,
practical.
and then you have to showcase your theoretical knowledge while you make the coffees as well,
Yeah,
or
kind of. It's
okay.
kind of like a theater, I would say. So you get 15 minutes. You're gonna serve 4 judges. You have to serve them one espresso each, one milk drink each. Back in the days, it used to be cappuccino. Now it's like whatever milk
Mhm.
beverage. And then there's a signature drink that has to contain espresso and no alcohol. So there's basically 12 drinks you have to serve to 4 judges, um, and
15 minutes.
in 15 minutes. It's pretty easy to do that in
Okay.
15
All
minutes.
right.
You can serve that in 5 minutes. But
Okay.
so you talk about, of course, you have to choose your own coffee. You have to, you're expected to explain why you chose that coffee, what it tastes like. Today, you get judged by having correct flavor notes, which obviously is not possible because it's a cultural thing and subjective thing. So when I say strawberry, another person will say mango because we have different references.
Mhm.
Might taste the same, but yeah. But so you're
But,
judged.
but do you agree? So I just need to make a point here. Do you agree with the fact that, because even if you take a coffee bean, whatever, just pick one, whatever, there are, aromatic compounds within the coffee bean by nature, which
For
have a
sure.
name and a surname,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
But then and that's objective.
Yeah.
What's subjective is, again, your perception
Yeah.
of it, right?
Yeah.
Because we have different
Yeah.
references.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So to back that up, I had a group of Chinese people for a coffee tasting in my lab, and they couldn't understand any of the words that I used for describing flavors because
Right.
they would say when I said, just an example, when I said strawberry, they would say something like fermented bean paste. That's very specific for Chinese cuisine, but not. I have never tasted it, so
Right.
I wouldn't know. Um, so yeah, but never mind. The competition. So you're serving the 4 judges espresso, milk beverage, and a signature drink, and then you're judged on technique, presentation skills. And that within that is kind of knowledge as well. Of course, the quality of the beverage and how precise you are on the flavor descriptors, which it didn't used to be like that, but now it is. Yeah,
So you were essentially, bottom line of this is what I'm trying to get with this is, you were able at some point of your career to shift your mindset.
it was actually. I have said this to many people, but the best thing that ever happened to me was not winning the world championship,
I was
but it
losing.
was not winning
Yeah.
in 2002.
Right.
And I was so devastated because I knew I was going to win and I didn't win. And then I had to really take a step back and start researching why didn't I win. I had to look at myself on video, which was painful, of course, and see, it was so obvious when I looked at myself afterwards, like, you know, I would not I would like to be served by this guy. So that not only changed my mind in terms of competition, but also the way I worked in the cafe. because it was very much, that kind of stereotype that the baristas are rude and,
Mhm.
it was pretty much like that back then. I was one of those persons. I was very arrogant, oh, you want milk in your espresso? Oh, no way, like, I'm a little bit like that still, but that's a different story. um,
But that adds to the character of who you are, it's fine.
yeah, but it really changed my mind on how we work, and I kind of understood what service was about. That's kind of the first time, one of the key or defining moments in my career, actually.
I guess the hardest part for someone to make that shift is to, realize that you have to make a shift, right? And well, with you, the breaking point was basically not winning the competition, the
Yeah,
world
yeah.
championship in 2002, right? So you said afterwards you started analyzing yourself, watching yourself on video. Was it an input you had by yourself, or did you have a mentor or someone who just advised you?
Um, I think most of it was kind of figuring it out myself a little bit. I obviously watched that video from the Worlds and saw how the winner, how nice he was and everything. I would say that
But the reason, let me just tell you why I'm asking you this, because now you employ how many people?
22 or something, yeah.
Right. I guess you're a mentor to some of them or all of them.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to understand if your approach to mentoring your staff now it's was defined back in the days already.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, and not necessarily just because of that competition, but also when I started kind of running the coffee shop that I worked in, it didn't really have a management, so I kind of took responsibility to manage it. And then we got the opportunity to open more stores, and we took over some old stores that was run by a few old ladies. And one of the issues we had was that everyone was doing different things in every store. The stores had the same name, Stockflits, but if a customer went to Stockflits in Sandvika or in Oslo City Mall,
They will get completely different experiences.
yeah, different products, different experiences. So we kind of started gathering, me and my friend Alex, who were running it back then, we started gathering or systemizing it. And then we started seeing the needs to actually write rules, and have good routines and everything.
Give it a standard essentially.
Yeah. And then, so even today, we have the same. We have very strict rules and standards and forms and Excel spreadsheets you have to fill out every day when you work there, of things you need to do. And, so I would say, in order to become a quality business, you just need to have really good systems in place. And you need to make sure that everyone follows it from the day they start until the day they finish, and
Right.
that's
So
it.
let's talk about business then. Because this is gonna sound wrong, but I don't mean it in a bad way. When I was researching you, becoming world champion to me seemed the least exciting thing about your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Really? Because, well, you travel to South America, source your own coffee. You're basically, and I spoke to a few other people as well, because I don't always trust Google.
Yeah, that's good.
And considering the things you've achieved in your life and the work you've dedicated your life to, they call it the mission, very fancy way. Um, and also the things you gave up, because I think you gave up a lot. You spent a lot of energy and time and money and stress takes away years of your life. Tim, was it worth it?
Yeah, I would never change my life. Yeah,
No?
I love doing what I do. I don't regret anything that I've done, actually. So,
And how important do you think the mission? Well, first of all, what exactly do you want to achieve professionally?
professionally, I want to change coffee, and that's a
That's a
very
very bold statement, my
yeah,
friend.
and it's a very broad term. I mean,
Can you get more into the specifics?
yeah, the more I've worked with coffee, the more I see how exploited the coffee growers have been
Right.
and still are. Also, I see how broken our agricultural system is. Um, a, a lot of people talk about sustainability, but the big elephant in the room is like nothing is sustainable when you fertilize it with, nitrogen fertilizers, and you spray what do you call herbicides and pesticides and fungicides and
Right.
everything. So I really want to change that, and that's partly why I now have my own farm, because I want
So
to.
you bought your own farm.
Yeah,
Where?
in Colombia.
Ah, so it's not in Oslo.
No. You can't grow coffee in Oslo
I
yet,
know.
but if we continue the way we do,
Will in
in
10 years maybe we will.
for sure.
Jesus. Yeah, Oslo is gonna look like the Amalfi Coast in 10
Yeah,
years somehow, which is not a bright scenario. I'll
No.
tell you that. But so you bought your own farm.
Yeah. And the idea in the beginning was just to do some, silly experiments.
How big is it?
It's 7 hectares.
All right.
I have planted less than half a hectare with coffee.
Okay.
The rest is just nothing.
Mhm.
So, no, the idea in the beginning was to just rent maybe 1 hectare, plant some coffee, do some experiments like removing some fruit from the tree to see if the remaining fruit will become better, growing shades to see if the coffee got better, all these kind of things. And then when I got the land, we started planting coffee. I was introduced to Elaine Ingham, which is a soil biologist,
Right.
and her work, and checked her out on the internet, and I was completely mind blown. Like, okay, I have to do something more on my farm and not just these silly experiments. So then the idea became that I want to prove that you can grow more coffee, better coffee, with higher quality, objectively, and more sustainably, with incorporating shade and more plants, and do that with less work and less cost.
Right.
So no fertilizers, no fungicides, pesticides, all these kind of things. So far I haven't succeeded. I'm in my 10th year now, and we've produced less than 200 kilos of coffee in total.
In total.
In total, yes,
Ooh.
in 10 years. So I lost a lot of the trees I planted. I'm from 𝒟𝒏𝓙𝗙, so I don't know how to plant coffee,
But you learned.
So,
in
yeah,
the
and
years.
that's kind of, I think the biggest value for me personally has been the learning curve has been extreme, like I've learned so much. I still haven't succeeded, but at least this year I've decided to hire a company to help me manage the farm. I've hired a person to help me on the ground to manage all the tasks we need to get done. So now I'm confident that we will succeed. And it's kind of that was the kind of the first step to have my own farm. And that same company, it's called Biophilia in Mexico. They are now also helping me doing trials on all the farms we buy from in Latin America, where we're basically taking 2 hectares on each farm. We're splitting it into 2 lots, so 1 hectare should be managed the way they've always been doing, with the synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides.
And the other one is where you experiment.
The other one is a biological farming techniques, which means you're using soil biology, encouraging biology to grow coffee naturally.
Beautiful. And you do this because they're next to each other so you can see the difference.
Yeah. So we're doing this
Fantastic.
for 3 years, and I know that we're going to succeed. So the goal is not to do the trial, but the goal is to convert all their farms into biological farms. And I'm 100% sure we're going to succeed. We just need to, asking a farmer to change their ways that they've been doing for 30, 40 years, risking their whole livelihood, I'm not prepared to do that. So we need to test it first so that they can see it for themselves, and then they can make the decision whether they want to do it or not.
Wow.
That's how you can change the coffee world.
Yeah, but Tim, you're talking about this, right? But this is mostly an impact on like you were talking about, how exploited the workers are,
Yeah.
right, and things like this. But that doesn't affect you, does it? Why would you worry about that?
It affects me because I'm all about having high quality coffee. I want to buy the highest qualities. I want to have steady supplies of high quality. Quality doesn't happen by itself. I mean, it randomly can happen, but if you want consistent high quality, you have to actually work for it. And if you don't pay the farmers well, they're not able to pay the workers well. If they don't pay the workers well, they will not have any workers. That's the truth and reality today. It's really difficult to get workers on the farm because it's hard work, and it's, nobody wants to work in a farm picking coffee, when you can lay on your couch surfing on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So that's the reality today. And
We have a much bigger impact, we as individuals, on other people and on the planet than we realize. We have an impact, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you realized that some time ago.
Yeah, maybe.
That's why you want to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
No, because what I just told you now was, why would you care? If somebody else doesn't, And then you're like, well, but it does affect me
Yeah,
in a
for
way.
sure, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. So, and I also like, when I go to these farms in the past, you see that they're lacking so much infrastructure in order to do the things that I want them to do with the coffee. So the first thing you have to do is to make sure you pay well for the coffee so that they can actually make a profit. You have to commit to buying certain volumes so that they know they are able to sell the coffee if they invest more into producing higher quality. And then you have to, together with them, figure out how can we produce the best possible quality on your farm, because every farm is different.
And
So
all of that, I'm just going to jump in. I find this super interesting, Tim. I don't know. But all of that could be very easily solved if on a different planet, all right, we had a planet filled with educated consumers who, because they're educated, they have no problem in investing more, in their cup of coffee
yeah,
because they give it more value.
yeah,
Right, and automatically you as a coffee shop owner will make more coffee, will make more money. Therefore, you could afford to pay a higher cost for your coffee, and it's basically like just is a chain,
yeah.
isn't it?
But I,
That makes sense.
I think in my case, it's something that I've chosen to do. Like from day one, our business model was to pay more for the coffee, but then we also have to charge more for the coffee.
That's right.
So I think we're asking a little bit too much of the consumer. Like
I think so.
I'm a consumer myself. I have pants, I have shirts, I have watches. I cannot go in and learn every single detail about every single product that I consume. So I think we're asking a little bit too much from the consumer to know everything about everything.
No, absolutely, of course. But I guess my point was just that if people understand what quality coffee is, right, then they would
And that's
be.
my job, That's my job as a roaster and coffee shop owner, to educate my
But you would
customers.
agree with the fact that if they did understand a little more about this industry, then they could. But a little more, that doesn't mean they have to become experts.
Yeah,
But at least they need to understand why one cup of coffee costs €1 and another cup of coffee costs
yeah,
three,
yeah.
right?
If people knew
Then
about coffee and how it's produced and how low pay the producers have gotten for 50 years, they would never pay, 30 kroners for a bag of coffee in the supermarket, because that gives you a really bad taste in your mouth.
and that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
That's exactly my point. So imagine the consumer will be a little more educated, then they would have no problem. Because the thing is that we work in a very weird way. If we understand something a little more, then it's easier for us to give it a bit more value,
Mm.
and not only value as in this fancy meaning, term like meditating, value yourself, but economical value, right? Then we could basically inject more money into the coffee chain,
Yeah.
essentially, and everybody will be happy.
I find it quite curious. There is a product called, or coffee has for a long time been associated with like fair trade. So you have fair trade certified coffee.
Right.
That's maybe like, I don't know the percentage exactly, but let's say it's 5% or 10% of what's sold in the Norwegian supermarket. What does that say about the other coffee that is not fair trade certified? And people still choose that. Nah, I don't want to. Nah, I'll take the cheap one.
So you're saying, even though there is a bit more information because there is the fair trade thing, people still choose to go for a lower quality coffee.
Yeah. And so no, I'll have that
Interesting.
unfair traded coffee instead. But I think it's
Why?
because
Why then?
I think it's because we don't trust certification programs.
Who?
For some good reason, like just having a stamp on a bag, because of greenwashing and social washing and all
Right.
these concepts, like uh, if you go to any coffee websites in the world, I'm pretty sure the word sustainability will pop up pretty soon. But I can honestly say that I don't know any coffee business today that is sustainable.
Even if you make it as sustainable as you can, meaning, starting from the farm, you don't use fertilizers and so on, you still have to transport that coffee from point A to point B.
With diesel ships and everything.
Meaning it can't be 100% sustainable.
No,
But
I don't believe so.
no, but you're a realist. It can't be. But you can make it as sustainable as you can.
Yeah, but most of it is not. Most of it is just words. because nobody does any work at farm level to change it. They don't do anything about the shipping to change it. They don't do anything about, and when I say they, I'm also involved in that, I'm also a company that there's very little things we can do to change all these kind of big systems. Shipping, for instance. Yeah, we can get the coffee on a sailboat, and that's actually happening. But so far I know of 2 of those boats, and they don't go to Norway. So I would still have to sail it to France and then drive it from France to Norway, which means probably
Carbon emission,
yeah,
blah blah blah.
compared to just shipping it, it's different. So I think it's both the work of the companies like myself. I hate using the word sustainable. The only time I use it is because of economics, because I know we pay a sustainable price, at least for the farmer.
Right.
I think we should pay a higher price, and also making the workers benefit more from the prices we pay. But that's the only time when I actually like to use that word, because
Because it's a
all the
bit
other
more
stuff
measurable and applicable.
yeah.
Of
And
course.
that's kind of back to the point I was talking about. When you want to work with quality, you have to start with the economics. You have to start paying a good price so that the farmers can invest in their farms, and they can invest in their workers. And over time, they will be able to produce higher quality because now they have the capability of doing it, because they have the infrastructure for it. If you don't do it, if you don't pay a good price, and if you don't commit year after year, yeah, it's like winning the lottery. If you can pay a good price to a farmer once, he will probably take that money and maybe invest in a nicer car, or even if he doesn't have a car, he'll buy a car, and it doesn't really benefit the coffee at all. So by being consistent buyer, if you're a consistent buyer, you can make sure that your coffee gets better because you have a relationship with the producer. You can talk to them, uh, get new ideas on how to improve the quality. You can change the protocols that they're using, the logistics and everything. And that's kind of how we like to work. It's pretty easy. It just takes time, and most people don't have patience.
Right. Tim, I was researching a little bit after our first chat
Mhm.
a month ago or so, and I found out some very interesting statistics. Um, I found out that Norway per capita is the second largest coffee consumer in the world, or in Europe, something like this.
Yes.
In the world or
In
in
the
Europe?
world, in the
In the
world.
world.
Yeah.
Second largest coffee consuming country.
Mhm.
That is absolutely crazy. I was reading that. Well, you're nodding your head. You'll tell me why in a second. But I was reading that the average Norwegian drinks an average of 3 or 4 cups of coffee per day,
Yeah, probably.
and 90% of the country consumes coffee
Yeah.
daily.
Yeah.
90% of the people in the country. Why were you nodding your head?
For me, it's not so strange. There's
No?
many reasons for this. I think
Tell me.
the main reason is it's cold and dark half the year,
Okay. Fair enough.
it
Yes.
makes you sleepy.
Right.
So caffeine is a very good drug to keep you alert. Um, and the further north you go, the more coffee they drink. My in-laws are living in Tromsø, and my mother-in-law, I think she drinks like at least 2 liters of coffee in the morning, alone.
What?
She's she's a monster when it comes to coffee.
Jesus.
So I once went there for Christmas, and I brought like 5 kilos of coffee, thinking, for Christmas that's more than enough, and they will have coffee for a couple of
She
months.
finished it in half an hour.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
But that's one reason. But that's a lot of coffee, man.
yeah, and also you have to understand that in the early 1800s, and all the way up to, or even before, and I think all the way up to the early 1900s, the majority of Norwegians were drunk all the time, because you didn't drink the water from the river because it was polluted, so you drank something fermented or
Or distilled.
distilled. Yeah. And then the church came along and saw this as a problem, and also the Labour Party saw it as a way. They looked at it like this: like the business owners were partly paying their workers in alcohol,
Yep.
and it was
Common thing in other countries as well.
and it was looked upon by the Labour Party as a way to control their workers, so that
Right.
they were constantly drunk, So the Labour Party created the abstinence movement, and then the church created church coffee, which was every Sunday after mass you would come and drink coffee instead of going and get drunk, and where women can participate and everything. So you had like two really strong forces in our society that was really pushing coffee as the kind of more healthy, sober drink, and that became such a cultural thing. So we still have church coffee today. It's quite common. And I'm pretty sure that the Labour Party doesn't only drink coffee, but
No, that's for sure.
but it's our kind of social drink, and we had also
So it is
Re-
embedded in the culture somehow
yeah,
since that time.
yeah, and
I see.
so for instance, and also you have to remember Norway was a very poor country before we discovered oil, so the social drink, and you see this especially in the north. People don't have to call to come and visit like we have to do here in Oslo.
Right.
They just pop by and they show up into your house, and there's always coffee. If you come by, you always get offered coffee. That's the social drink in our society.
Interesting. Man, I could let this go for hours and hours actually. But I was making the point of the statistic in Norway because you opened a coffee shop.
Yeah.
We've said it a few times now. Now, you don't like the word speciality, so I'm not gonna use it. But did you have a hard time in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean,
When did you open?
we opened in 2007.
2007.
Just to find the space to open in was pretty difficult in 2007 for some obscure reason. I think the economy was kind of going really well. 1 year later, we had a recession, so then there were plenty of
2008,
spaces.
right?
Yeah, but actually, my business plan, it said do not open at 𝒟𝒏𝓙𝒏𝓙, and I was looking more for like a high
𝒟𝒏𝓙𝒏𝓙 is the
street.
hipster sort of area of Oslo.
Yeah,
Why?
I was looking more for like a business area or something like that. And then I realized, when I couldn't find a space, that 𝒟𝒏𝓙𝒏𝓙 was actually quite perfect. And the corner where we are now is pretty perfect for us back then, because we were first and foremost a coffee roastery. And then we had like the coffee shop just like a showroom. So we didn't really have any seats. I had one chair in the coffee shop, and that was reserved for my grandfather,
Right.
because he liked to come and drink coffee. Of course, you could sit there when he wasn't there, but if he came, you had to.
You had to stand up.
Yeah. And then today, of course, we took the roaster out because we needed more space. We did that in 2018, so now we have more seats and everything. But I never thought of it as being. It wasn't supposed to be a very busy store. The business was selling roasted coffee to other businesses. Today, our business has become more towards consumer focused, and our coffee shop is doing really well. It's very busy. So
Yeah, I guess my question was in relation to legacy, because I was trying to understand if your concept of coffee at the beginning
that was
was
hard.
hard for people.
Yeah.
That was my point, right?
Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge?
First of all, we didn't serve any food. We had a little bit of pastries in the beginning, but it was like after 2 weeks, it just wasn't good enough. So
No.
we quit. We at some point we would get new coffees in that we were excited about, so we would just remove the milk from our store and say we have Black Week, if that's something different today, but it was Black Coffee Week.
Is that an exaggeration, or did you actually remove
No,
milk
we
from
did.
your
Yeah, so we only
You
sold
removed
black
milk
coffee and
from your
espresso.
toast.
Yeah, and then that upset people a lot, but we didn't really care. We were there to show coffee and sell coffee. And then, there was a wave of coffee enthusiasts that emerged in like 2010, 11, 12-ish. It was like a big kind of wave of like coffee was exciting. And then after that, a lot of people were excited about hand brewing and drinking black coffee. And so after that, we feel that we are understood. Before, people didn't really understand the concept at all. So today it's not something foreign for anyone, because you can go anywhere in the world and any coffee shop will have like a brew bar, or serve black coffee. Even in Italy, you can get filter coffee. 10 years ago, that was unheard of.
Can you now?
Yeah, for
Get
sure.
filter
Yeah,
coffee
yeah.
locally?
At least in Milan, in Rome, and
Not in Napoli. I
Firenze.
don't think so.
Yeah, there is one. No, I went to
There
Sicily.
is one which went bankrupt
Okay.
last year. No, I don't know. No, it's not really. No, we have this concept that coffee. It has to be very short, very concentrated. Actually, let's get into this now.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but all right, hold on. Business first. So there is one thing I always wondered, right, about the business of coffee, which is, so I was working in a coffee shop myself when I was a kid. I must have been like 16 or something, and I was selling coffee back in the days. The coffee, I'm talking, yeah, maybe I'm not that old, so maybe 2009, something like this, 2010, something like that. And the coffee used to cost 80 cents.
Mm.
And I was always wondering, how can a business survive selling a coffee for 80 cents? Like, what's the margin you really make
Mm.
there, right? Now, of course, Norway having different economics, the coffee doesn't cost 80 cents. And you explained it earlier as well. The price you pay for a cup of coffee is directly correlated with how the workers were treated and,
Yeah.
and its quality and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But can you tell me a little more about the coffee business? Because
Yeah. I had actually a person in my coffee shop last week. He approached me and said he wanted to open a coffee shop, and I said, "Why? Like, what
are you
the?
crazy?
Yeah, are you crazy?" And he kind of, yeah, you have a coffee shop, like, yeah, but we're more like an integrated business. So I would never recommend anyone opening a coffee shop. There's no money in it. If you do it for money, do something else. It's not a good idea unless you want to open a chain of coffee shops and maybe have a roastery as well. Then you might be able to make some money, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work, and it's probably not the best investment for your money. If you're into money, if you're passionate about coffee, you want to make coffee for a living, don't open a coffee shop, because you're going to do a lot of stuff that is not related to making coffee. It's going to steal time from you so you can't make coffee, because you're going to have to do, work with employees and, taxes and all these kind of things. So people think that opening a coffee shop is something cozy, that you open a place and you can sit there and drink coffee and have a good time with your customers. It's nothing like that. It's hard work. It's probably one of the hardest jobs that I know, except from bartending, where you actually do the same, but at nighttime with drunk
Yeah.
people. So
But you were telling me that because, of course, you don't only have a coffee shop, you have a roastery,
yeah,
and then, you sell online
yeah.
and so on. So what's your core business essentially?
So for me, our core business is importing unroasted coffee. We roast the coffee and we sell roasted coffee to consumers and to businesses and also to my own coffee shop.
Right.
So and because we do that, we sell a lot of coffee in our coffee shop. I mean, just last week we sold 250 kilos of beans
Yeah, man,
in
I'll
my
tell you
coffee shop.
something. When I came the first time, I was like, why am I queuing for 10 minutes to get a cup of coffee?
Yeah,
Because you're always busy.
yeah,
Every time I've been there,
yeah, yeah,
not even once. And the stuff is always really nice. And then by the time I sip my coffee, I'm like, okay, it was worth it.
yeah. That's nice.
But man, true. But man, there is people every time.
Mm. So I think
You
the
are busy.
the secret to running a successful coffee shop, and it's pretty obvious to see when you go to Starbucks and Espresso House and all these places. They don't only sell coffee; they sell other stuff as well. So you have to make sure that every customer spends, maybe 100 to 150 crowns.
That's
Uh,
about 10 to 15 euros.
Yeah, and the reason for that is you can only manage a certain amount of customers per day. Even in the most busy coffee shop can maybe
Right.
have 1,000 customers, which is a lot. On our record is like 450 people in one day.
One day.
Yeah, which is,
I don't want to say this. I'll let you say this. Can you say how big your coffee shop is in
it's
square
like
meters?
50 square meters maybe. Yeah.
You had
So
450
yeah,
people
yeah,
one
so
day.
it's a lot of that's our record.
But
470 or 450, I don't remember.
did they came in blocks of 50
No,
at a
no.
time? In and out? How
No,
did that work
and I'll,
exactly?
I'll explain to you, because we sell takeaway, so people can take their coffee out. We sell coffee to drink inside, and we also sell bags. So
Right.
we
Okay.
have several products, but we wouldn't manage if we only sold coffee by the cup, because that's not enough business for us to survive. We also have to sell the beans. Other coffee shops, they rely on selling food, maybe juice, soda, coffee, pastries. We don't sell pastries, but in order to succeed as a coffee shop, you have to really sell more than just coffee. And this person that I was talking to last week, he wanted to open a coffee shop with like 3 seats, a small espresso machine. And I'm like, yeah, if you want to pay money from your own pocket so that other people can drink coffee, that's the model.
That's great.
That's the model. Because the thing, especially here in Norway, the labor cost is really high.
Yep.
So, and in order to make a queue move, you need to have enough baristas. Otherwise, people don't want to go there because it's too slow. And then you have downtime with no customers. So, but you still have to have the same amount of baristas. So that's really why you need to sell more than just coffee.
Can I ask you, and you don't have to answer this, but the margin you have on an average cup of coffee in percentage, if you want, what is it?
Oh, I think the costs might be, let's say, just a black coffee. I think the cost for me would be, we operate with like 7 to 9 crowns
Costs.
in just the raw material,
Right.
and then you sell it for like 50. But then you also have to pay
The labor.
electricity, labor, rent, all these kind of things. So I don't really know the margin per se. Also,
You're definitely below 50% margin.
yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah. But I have like some golden numbers, and I'm part owner in a coffee shop in Tromsø, an old employer of ours opened, 𝒟𝒏𝓎𝗢𝗙, and I've been mentoring her on the numbers and everything. She has like a wine bar in the evening and coffee shop in the daytime.
Right.
And the golden numbers is that you need at least 65% margin on everything you sell. Like, and then out of that, you have to pay maximum 35% labor cost from your sales.
Out of the 65?
No, out of
Or
the 100%
out of the
sales.
100.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you have some fixed cost, of course. And then if you're lucky, you're somewhere between 0 and 10% margin on the bottom line. If you're lucky, most coffee shops are minus.
Hence, guys, do not open just a coffee shop.
No.
Make sure you sell sandwiches and other
Yeah.
things.
And she was struggling actually in the beginning because she had pretty good sales, but they used too much labor. And if you just have one person too many each day, it just kills your profit. So that's how important it is to be on top of that in Norway.
And that's why, because the roastery, did it came with the shop or did you start it later?
No, we actually, when I opened my shop, we had the roastery inside the shop.
Right.
So we were roasting there, and we were only 5 people working there in total, including myself. So everyone was doing everything. Today we have like administration, and so it's a bit different.
How long did it take for you to spread your vision, your concept? How long did it take for the consumer to understand that you would provide them a different type of product and service?
I think it just came gradually. I mean,
Would you be able to quantify it more or less? Was it a year, 2,
not
3?
not really. I think, like I said, when hand brewing became popular, and I think that was around between 2010 and 2012, in
Right.
that area, then a lot of people started brewing coffee at home. COVID also helped a lot, but people understood what we were doing before that as well. But I think it's kind of evolved with the concept of hand brewing, and that's been more popularized. I think concepts like 𝒟𝒏𝓎𝗙𝗙, who have 50 stores or something, they've been really pushing, black coffee, hand brewing. They've been doing a lot of great stuff for us as well, because when people learn there, they also can come to us, and
Right.
so
So you don't necessarily view them as a competition.
not at all, actually. I view them as one of the best places to go for coffee in Norway.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
Okay.
If you want to buy coffee beans or black coffee or something that is not so barista dependent, then it's a very safe place to go. For espresso, it's a different story. It's so barista dependent. So, but yeah, if I'm out of coffee beans, I can always go to Coffee Bendy and buy some seriously good beans that are well roasted, and yeah, so they're very high quality on what they buy.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Tim, let's talk about coffee then
yeah, okay.
as a raw material. Because I'm really interested to hear your point of view when it comes to quality,
Mm.
right? Again, coming from the spirits world, we with distilled spirits, the opinion of the average consumer is, well, if I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's not.
Yeah,
Right? When in reality, it's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And me and you, we agree that quality is indeed measurable,
Mhm.
right? And that's why it's it's objective.
Mhm.
Now, is quality in coffee objective? You
Wow.
were saying something like this earlier, but
Yeah.
let's just pick up on that.
For me, it is. The problem is you're talking about taste, you know. So people are very skewed because if they don't like it, they feel it's low quality.
Yes, but objectively speaking, I'm sure with your experience and expertise, you'll be able, if I gave you 2 cups of coffee, you'll be able to say, okay, this is 9 out of 10
Yeah.
because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And this is a 10 out of 10 because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you could, because even though, let's say, acidity is perceived differently by different people, and so are flavors, and so it's sweetness, and so it's everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
However, tell me if I'm wrong. If you gather 100 coffee experts, then we need to define what a coffee expert is, all right? But if you gather 100 coffee experts in a room and you give them the same cup of coffee and the same criteria to follow and to judge it, if that cup of coffee is actually of a high quality, objectively speaking, people, most of these people out of 100 will be able to say, okay, this is high quality because of X, Y, and Z.
That's already happening. So,
There you go.
for instance, you can take a class called Q grading class, which is like a certification. Yeah, I've taken it, but there you actually learn to calibrate what is different quality levels with other judges, so that you have like a basic understanding of this is a high quality coffee, this is a medium quality coffee, this is a low quality coffee, and it's pretty broad, but also they test your ability to taste and discriminate and be consistent as a taster.
Right.
It's pretty easy, and also when you have like coffee competitions for producers, for instance, Cup of Excellence, which is like an auction system for producers where they can submit samples, the very best coffees get selected. Maybe there will be 500 coffees that are submitted for this competition. And then you have a national jury first, kind of just selecting what they think is the best out of the best. And then that goes into a second round where international juries come and taste. And, after 3-4 rounds of tasting, it's pretty clear which ones are better or not. And if you look at like average scores then from each judge on all these coffees, it will be pretty consistent. There will always be some outliers, but it will be pretty consistent on who is better than the other one.
Right. And how can I, as a consumer, understand if I'm drinking a high quality cup of coffee?
First of all, high quality costs a little bit more. So if you buy the cheapest coffee, then you are never able to taste it.
No, I mean, when I go to a shop,
Yeah.
right, and I order a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
how do I know I'm drinking a high quality cup of coffee?
Of course, it should be sweet.
Okay.
Even though there's no sugar in coffee, it can be perceived as sweet. It should probably not have any overly like harsh roasty flavors or bitter flavors.
So it shouldn't be overly bitter.
No, it can be dark roasted, but it shouldn't be kind of burnt, like, and it's the same with if it's too light, it can be tasting like cucumber or grains or cereal. So it's not about being the lightest or, but somewhere in between there's a lot of differences.
Translated to flavor, right?
Yeah.
What was the movie with Denzel Washington? Tell it to me like I'm 3 years old. Something like that.
Jesus
Translated
Christ,
into
it's
flavor,
difficult. Yeah.
right? That means, so let's say dark roasting, flavors of the dark chocolate, and so on. The next step from there, which will be burnt,
Yeah.
then the burnt flavor also has a bitter sensation to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if it becomes bitter to the point that it's unpleasant, then you know either you don't have enough experience to judge it, or you are most likely drinking a low quality cup of coffee.
Yeah. The problem if you roast it too dark, you also lose sweetness, you lose acidity, you lose
Right.
flavors. So I very often compare it to pizza, actually, not just because you're Italian, but you know,
From Napoli, I'm not only Italian.
if you burn the pizza, everything just tastes the same. It tastes burnt carbon, you know. And if the pizza is undercooked, you taste these kind of yeasty flavors, and it's not good. When the pizza is perfect, and it can be variations of, you know, how much is cooked, but you will be able to taste the tomato, you will be able to taste the cheese, you will be able to taste whatever ingredients is on there. It's not just one mess, you know. It's clear that you can taste different ingredients. The pizza has acidity, it has sweetness, bitterness, all these kind of things,
That's right.
and it gives you pleasure. That's the same with coffee for me. Like the sweet, it needs to be sweet. If it's not sweet, it's low quality for sure. If it tastes like raw peanuts, it's normally low quality. If it's too bitter or too roasty, it's not roasted well. It can be high quality raw material, roasted too much. If it tastes cereal, it could be high quality material, but roasted too light. So it's all this kind of combination that makes it a little bit complex. And also, even if you had the best quality green beans, the best quality roast, you can still pretty much screw
Mess
it
it
up
up.
in the brewing.
Right.
Let's say you made it too thin, so it tastes like water, or you made it too strong, so it becomes quite astringent. So it's
Right.
complex.
What's the difference when it comes to essentially the thickness of the what do you call it? When you do the grinding.
The fineness, or
Yeah. So how does that differentiate in terms of, you know, more fine or thicker?
the traditional learning is that the more fine you grind it, the more you extract, hence more flavor in the.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Uh,
Okay.
everything depends in coffee. Like, you cannot say it's like this.
Okay.
So, but in general, with the finer you grind, the more you're able to extract. You come to a point where it's too fine, that the water is not able to even go through the coffee.
Right.
So it will make an easy way around it, or make a hole in it, and everything will go through there. Then you create a very unbalanced coffee. And this is true for espresso. It's also true for filter coffee. So you come to a point where you go finer and finer, the coffee becomes stronger and stronger, and all of a sudden you went too fine, and the coffee becomes weak again, because the water is not able to go through the actual grounds.
Makes sense.
So in traditional coffee learning, we talk about over extracting the coffee, which means you pulled out too much from the coffee, and that becomes bitter and astringent.
Yeah, because my question was, how do you know when you extract it too much? When it becomes bitter?
You have to taste. The problem is, and this is kind of what I've learned myself. If you have a well roasted, high quality coffee, and you have a very high extraction, yeah, it becomes bitter and astringent, but it also becomes much stronger. So if you then dilute it down to the strength that you're used to, it normally tastes really delicious. But you can come to a point where you extract maybe a little bit too much of the coffee, where you start tasting like cellulose flavors, because you start to extract the actual cellulose from the beans. That's not good, but there's a big margin of error there. It's just that in coffee, most people who brew coffee don't measure their coffee. They don't measure the strength and the extraction. So they just think, when I went too fine, it becomes bitter because I over extracted it. While you might be able to extract much more of it without getting bitterness, but you reach a coffee that is stronger than what you're used to, so it's unpleasant to drink for you. So this kind of goes hand in hand. It's quite complicated to teach, and I try to do it to my baristas as well. And it's normally we'll just brew the same coffee with a coarse grind where it becomes weak. Everyone is kind of in agreement that that doesn't taste good. Then you have one that is kind of balanced and a good grind, and then you have one that is a little too fine, so it becomes what they call over extracted. But then you have like a strength of, let's say, 1.1% coffee in the water, so 1.1 TDS, which is the weak one. 1.4, which is normally the strength that here in Norway we're used to. So that means 1.4% coffee, 98.6% water. So it's
Right.
just how strong the actual beverage is. And then the one that is ground really fine, let's say it's a 1.8% coffee and the rest is water. So it's 0.4% stronger than the one that you're used to. That will for you taste very, very bitter and astringent and strong and salty. So you say, this is over
Is that what
extracted.
we have in Italy?
No, in Norway, I would say that,
No.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll come to Italy.
Yes, come to
And so if it's 1.8% strength, everyone will say, "Oh, this doesn't taste good. It's astringent and bitter." But if we then put some clean water in the brew, diluted to 1.4 strength, then everyone will say, "This tastes delicious, sweet, balanced." You know,
I see.
so it's complicated. So in Italy, espresso strength is much higher than what I've been talking about now. Like filter coffee in Norway is 1.4% strength. An espresso in Italy can be anything from 8 to 11, 12% strength.
Jesus.
So
Time 10x or something
yeah,
like that.
something like that. So for me, espresso is just a coffee concentrate. It's not something magic. It's still coffee beans and water. That's it, you know? It's just much stronger. And to the most efficient way to make it strong that fast, in 25 seconds, like you say, is to add pressure. So you have a pressurized brewing mechanics. But an 8% espresso is much more pleasant to drink than a 12% strength espresso for most people. Unless you're from Naples and you're used to 12%, and then you drink
Then
an 8% and you think
it's
this
like
is weak.
water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So everything is cultural here. And
100%. No, but I agree with you, and it's about the foods you eat as well, right? Because the foods you eat and the amount of spices and chili and the concentration of the food you eat also helps you build a resistance in your palate.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely, absolutely.
a well-brewed coffee will taste good at any strength for a certain person who's used to that strength. But a well-brewed coffee is normally quite balanced. It can taste where you have like specific flavors of what beans you used. Like you can really taste where the coffee is from, and that's, in my opinion, good quality. And then you have, there are different criteria of measuring quality for sure, but it's also a little cultural what people think is good quality.
We mentioned this a few times, and then we move on to the last subject. But I could sit here and talk to you for hours. Actually,
Yeah, okay.
I'm having a lot of
I have
fun.
time now.
No. We mentioned this a few times, but can you tell me the top 2 or 3 things that are actually wrong with Italian coffee? Let's explain it.
my God.
Where do we start?
Yeah, I think
And look, I'm setting myself up for they're gonna cut my head off.
yeah,
when
they're
I go
gonna
back
cut
to
my head off as
they're
well.
No, they won't. But for them, I'm a traitor or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm searching for the truth.
Okay, let's start with the first thing that's wrong, and let me just say that the espresso culture for me is one of the most beautiful ones in the world. Just being in an Italian coffee shop, I can stand there for hours just watching. It's beautiful. The problem is it's too cheap. That's problem number one. And because of that, you have terrible beans, and you're kind of stuck in the old ways with roasting as well. So very often it's not roasted very well.
When you say not roasted very well, you mean it's roasted too much.
Too much or way too long. Like you're spending 20 minutes to roast a batch of coffee, in a modern roaster. Just makes the coffee really flat and bitter.
Because the more you roast, because roasting can help emphasize the DNA, the aromas that are present in the DNA,
Or you can just
or it
cover it
can
off. Yeah.
just knock it off.
Yeah. You can kind of make it more bland, so to say, so it doesn't really taste. Probably because the quality is not great, so you want it to taste less bland. You kind of roast it slow and long and dark, and then it just tastes like roasted coffee.
That's right. In bartending, when it's busy and we're making a lot of drinks, and one of the drinks doesn't come out as good as it should, how do you fix it? You add sugar in.
Yeah.
You don't make a new one.
Yeah, and that's the same in Italy. A lot of people drink coffee with sugar and even I do that when I'm in Italy. If I go to any random coffee bar, I always put sugar in because it has to be sugar in to make it palatable. If you go to a nice coffee shop that has a good coffee and make espresso well, you don't need sugar. It's naturally sweet. But I think also you said a little bit, maybe a little too proud of your culture, so you don't really need to learn how to make espresso. And you see, if you go to a coffee shop, it's more about being fast than being, proper.
True.
Which, is not great for quality.
No, no.
I'm not saying it has to be very slow, but, there's
A balance.
yeah, of course.
Interesting. when it comes to quality in terms of coffee, we were talking about the raw material, and talking to you on the phone a month ago or so, I realized that, well, first of all, many people forget coffee is a plant,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And as such, it is dependent on climate, microclimate, soil, weather, water, nutrients, and so on and so forth. Um, can you take me a little bit through the journey of the coffee bean? Because it starts in the soil, right?
Yeah.
It starts on the plant.
Yeah.
And does the maturity of the fruit, because it's a fruit,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Does the maturity of the fruit at the point of harvest, can that be an indicator of quality already?
Yes, for sure.
How does that work?
Okay, so to make good coffee, let's say I wanted to start from scratch today to make the best possible coffee. First of all, you have to find the right seeds for you to plant. And by the right seeds, I mean the right variety. So if I had for instance, on my farm, I have a variety garden where I have 15 different varieties. And I planted them to see which one does well on my farm, which tastes good and which does well as a tree. Like, how do they like to grow there? That will take you 4 or 5 years to see. Once you have established this one is the one I want to plant, and it takes 4 or 5 years because from seed to production, it takes 3, 4 years. Then you have to harvest, you taste, maybe you're happy or not. Then you wait another year for the next harvest to take the seeds and you replant.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, so just to develop one variety on your own farm by that kind of trial and error takes about 10 years. But if you already know, let's say your neighbor has some fantastic coffee seeds, you can just take those and plant it on your own. You plant the seeds, it will take a year before you can plant a tree into your field. And from when you plant the tree into your field until you have a production, between 2 to 4 years. Then the tree has cherries, and of course, it's like any other fruit, you pick the ripe ones to get the best quality. If you pick unripe ones, the coffee will taste like raw peanuts. And if you let them hang on the tree for too long, they will become overripe and maybe ferment or get damaged by insects, or they can even break open because of too much rain and too much sun.
What kind of flavors do they develop when what kind of flavor does it develop when it's overripe?
Very often fermented fruits, so it would be like extreme overripe mango or just rotten.
Right.
Yeah, can be rotten fruits. Can also be that you get fungus attacks or fungal attacks, so you get like phenolic flavors, or we call them moldy flavors, or can taste like earth.
Right.
So that's a
And
defect.
the age of the tree itself, of the plant itself, does that have an effect on the concentration of fruit flavors?
Yes, a little bit, and there is no real research on that, as far as I know. But in my experience, the first 1 to 2 to 3 pickings from a new coffee tree does not taste great, and then after that, it starts to really taste better and better.
But is there such a thing as a plant which is too old?
We don't know. There's no research on that. But
Okay.
I would say some of the best coffees in the world come from Kenya, from trees that are planted in the 1930s, 1940s.
There you go. Okay, right. Because there is a similar concept in grapes. We have you heard of the concept of old vines?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Same thing. These vines will typically produce way less fruit,
Mm,
right? So not much volume there, but the fruit they produce is very concentrated.
yeah. I'm not sure if it's the same in coffee, and I think it's too difficult to say because uh, a lot of the coffees in the world are grown in the conventional way, which means they use the same fertilizers everywhere, NPK fertilizers. A lot of glyphosate or herbicides have been sprayed, which accumulate in the soil, which also inhibits micronutrients to be taken up from the tree for the trees. So it's really difficult to say, and there's not a lot of research in this because the quality of aspect of coffee uh, is something new.
Right.
It's a very young industry. The Specialty Coffee Association, I think, started in the 70s or 80s, and it's only been since the mid 2000s where we have been really focusing on single farm, single variety coffees. So that's like less than 20 years.
Right.
Before that, the coffee came from Kenya, and that was it.
That's it.
Or Colombia. It's like saying the wine comes from France.
Just just wait another 30, 40 years. We'll have coffee plantations in Oslo here.
For sure, for sure.
Um, okay. Well, if I don't want to use fertilizers to protect my plant, how else can I protect it?
Wow. I would say that
Did you say wow? Because that's a good question.
it's a big topic.
All right.
Uh,
But
and
you
I
can tell me.
and I
You
didn't
asked
even
a really good question, my friend.
I didn't even answer your previous question. We just got to the farm part. But
Yeah,
yeah.
you did. But go ahead. You can answer both of them at the same
Okay.
time. I'm just so interested. I'm asking so much.
Let's take the to protect the coffee tree, because the one of the biggest issues we have in coffee today is leaf rust. It's a fungus that attacks the leaves of the coffee tree, so they fall off, and that means they can't photosynthesize. They cannot produce for like 2 years, because the next time it comes rain, you don't have the flowering which you need to get fruit. You have production of new leaves because the tree lost all its leaves. It will produce new leaves before it can produce flowers again.
Right.
And this is a huge problem, and it's spreading like crazy, not just in all the countries of the world, the producing countries, but also in all altitudes. Um, the only kind of remedy that people have come up with is to make new hybrid cultivars by cross-pollination. So you cross-pollinate a Robusta hybrid. So a Robusta hybrid means a Robusta tree and a Arabica tree was once cross-pollinated naturally, and they got a kid that is a hybrid that is more resistant against the rust, the leaf rust. They use that plant to cross-pollinate with higher quality ones, higher quality Arabica trees, to improve the flavor, because the flavor of the Robusta hybrid is not so good.
Right.
So, and that's been done for many years in Colombia, in Honduras, in Brazil, to create new hybrids that have good quality, good production, and better resistance against the leaf rusts. But we see, after a few years, the leaf rust mutates all the time. So after a few years, these resistant varieties become tolerant, and then they lose their tolerance and become susceptible to leaf rust.
Again.
Yeah. So now there's a huge program called the World Coffee Research, where they're doing research on developing even more of these new varieties or new hybrids. And that's great, We need more genetic diversification in coffee, because it's pretty narrow, the pool of genetics we have. But it's sold to us as the only solution to leaf rust, Instead of asking, why do we get the leaf rust in the first place?
Yes.
It's because the trees are unhealthy. Because they eat nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's all they eat.
Because the soil is unhealthy itself.
Yeah.
And gathering not enough nutrients or unhealthy things from the nutrients, the tree becomes unhealthy.
So one of the first things today that people do when they start a coffee plantation is to cut down all the trees that are there. They might till the soil or plow the soil, they plant the coffee, and then that's a perfect recipe to kill everything that's in the soil that is supposed to feed your coffee trees. So you create like a desert, and you put the coffee trees there. The only way to make them grow is to fertilize them. Where you should actually do the opposite. You should create an ecosystem, keep the shade trees that are already there, plant more stuff.
Maybe plant different things. Diversify, essentially.
You can plant vines, you can plant fruit trees, grasses, whatever, banana, shade trees. Create an ecosystem that can really feed and support the coffee trees. The reason why we've done the opposite, where we do the monoculture, is because we expect coffee trees to produce, huge amounts of coffee. That is maybe unrealistic. So we need to really look at coffee in a different way. If you have a healthy soil with fully functional soil food web, which means a lot of microbes that can extract minerals and nutrients for the coffee tree and feed the coffee trees. You have earthworms and tiny little insects that eat microorganisms and cycle nutrients and everything. If you have a functioning soil food web, that means you also have a good ecosystem above the soil. That means shade trees, fruit trees, everything. Then the trees will get foods, micronutrients, and everything they need all the time, not just 3 times a year when you apply something,
Right.
It gets it every day, all the time. And they become more healthy. A healthy plant normally has a harder cell structure in their leaf tissue and everything. And that means the leaf rust, which is designed to kind of remove
Break these
unhealthy
fibers and
plants,
stuff.
it's not able to digest it.
Right.
They might be on the leaf, but they're not able to take over, because there are other fungus as well that eat the leaf rust.
Right.
You have insects, for instance, that are, and this has been some new research that I've seen done in other crops, that when plants have a certain level of bricks, um, that means they have a more waxy leaf. They have more kind of hard, woody structure in the whole plant tissue.
More dense.
Yeah, and that means the insects that are normally eating leaves, they're not able to digest it anymore. It would be like if we started to eat grass or wood.
Yep.
We can get full, but we won't be able to digest.
No.
So we will die. So the insects stay away from those kind of healthy plants. And that's the same with the leaf rusts. So we need to make sure we have healthy plants. And the only way to have healthy plants is to have healthy soil. The only way to have a healthy soil is to have a healthy ecosystem. Simple.
Well, if it's so simple, why hasn't it been done?
It's becoming new. This is,
Relatively new.
I wouldn't say it's new knowledge, but there is much more knowledge about this now than it was just 10 years ago. So I think we have been probably a little bit lazy because of the green revolution, and it kind of worked. Production went up and everything was great, but now we see these food systems are collapsing, and we're getting more and more problems with the crops, less and less nutrients in the food, and it's all related to the way we are producing it.
That's right.
So I think there's more and more people who are realizing that this is not the way forward, and there's more and more research in it. We see in other crops that people are changing. So why hasn't it come to coffee yet? Well, maybe that's an economical thing as well, because most farmers don't make enough money to go and get the education to do this.
We go always back there,
yeah.
right? Always.
So there's very little know-how. For instance, in Colombia, where I am in Huila, I haven't met anyone that has been talking about these concepts from an agricultural or from an agronomist or a farmer. So if I was there and lived there and I wanted to do it, who should I ask? There's no one around.
Right. Tim, can I just ask you? We spoke about your farm earlier. Do you have more than one?
No, fortunately, I only have one.
One.
One headache.
One a day. Can I ask you how much does it cost if I want to buy a farm in South America?
Ooh, well, so far I've spent about 200,000 euros on the whole project.
That's in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Still a lot of money.
the majority of that was, of course, to buy the land. Maybe I think the land itself was $130,000. And then I've spent the rest on kind of running.
Are you the sole owner of the business?
Yeah.
Jesus, you do a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah.
You're managing just fine. You look sharp.
Yeah, but I have a great team out here in Norway. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't have a good team. So Stephanie, who's running our espresso bar, she's been with me for 15 years, and she's the reason why our staff are so well trained. She does all the training, why we have the level of service we are able to deliver in our coffee shop. And my whole team, they're working together as a team. They really want us to do better, and that's the culture in our company. So without them, I wouldn't be anything, because I wouldn't be able to travel and do the things that I do, and be allowed to have a vision, I think.
Let's go back for a second to the coffee bean journey, right?
Yeah, we only came to the farm.
So let's say, yeah, but it's so much to talk about that, right? So, all right, healthy soil, healthy plant. You harvest the coffee when it's ripe.
Yep.
What happens then?
Then you have to process the coffee in some way, or
Because it is a fruit,
yeah, it is a fruit, and we only buy the dried beans. We import the dried beans
right?
that is inside the fruit. So normally there's 2 beans inside of one cherry. So you can either just dry the whole cherry. It's normally done on a raised bed. You can do it mechanically, or you can do it on the ground on a patio. We prefer raised beds in shade. You can also do it mechanically, but then you have to have a lot of mechanical dryers and do it very slowly and everything. If you do it as a whole cherry, you will get a lot of fruit flavor in the coffee, because the cherry will kind of ferment with a little bit of help of yeast. So you get this kind of flavored coffee in some way, that where you have like a processed flavor. Can be like a very ripe banana or ripe strawberries or
Right.
peach. Can also be like rotten fruit, rotten bananas.
You don't sell any of these in your shop, right?
I have one natural process from Ethiopia because they have climate for it there, and it's done by tradition. And the farmer we do it or buy it from, it does it very kind of precisely.
Right.
So I prefer washed coffees myself, and that's a little bit more complicated. Um, it's easier to dry, but it takes a little bit more work. So then you would actually harvest the cherries. We sort the cherries after harvest to take out all the unripes and overripes, because you do get them in the basket.
Do you see them by size, or how do you know what are
Unripes will be green or partly green.
So color.
Yeah.
Okay.
Overripes will be purple or black, or
Right.
you know.
Right.
And then you deliver the cherries into a big hopper. Normally we prefer those to be made out of steel or something that is easy to clean. And then you depulp the cherries. So you basically squeeze the cherries and the two beans will fall out. And then you can either wash them mechanically, which means you scrape off the mucilage layer by a centrifugal machine. Or you can put the beans that still has like a mucilage layer around it. You can put them in a tank. It can be a steel tank, plastic tank, whatever, as long as it's clean. And it will ferment. So there will be bacteria first that will exude enzymes to break down the kind of pectins and everything in the mucilage. Once the kind
So
of
it's an intercellular fermentation in the end, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
not like a
fermentation.
traditional fermentation as we know it, where we have a raw material, we mix it with water, we add the yeast, and there is a fermentation taking
No,
place.
so you don't have to add yeast. I mean, there's plenty of yeast around.
Of course, it's
But
a
people
fungi,
today,
right?
yeah.
So, but the fermentation, that's what I'm trying to understand. The fermentation takes place from within the bean itself.
No, it's from the outside. So
Okay.
so the beans are actually you don't want to ferment the beans.
Yeah, but that's why I'm asking. So how does that
So
work exactly?
the bean has still a mucilage layer around,
Right.
which is like a loose, slimy layer, and it's really difficult to remove unless you have this centrifugal machine.
Right.
So by tradition, they would just leave the beans in a tank, and then you have bacteria and yeast that are kind of consuming this mucilage layer. And then once you kind of can feel that the mucilage layer is kind of letting go, then you can just wash the beans in the water,
Okay.
clean off the mucilage layer, and then you have the beans still with a parchment layer around,
Right.
and that's what you dry.
Right.
And to dry the parchment coffee is much easier than to dry the whole cherry.
Right.
It doesn't ferment, and but you can over ferment the coffee in the tank, and it will taste like a natural. You can under ferment it, so you still have mucilage left on when you dry, and you have fermentation during drying. So things can go wrong all the way, but it's pretty easy to make it clean.
Right.
You just need
Pretty
to know what to do.
straightforward.
Yeah. Once you dry it, you can do that in a bad way. You can dry it too fast, too hot. Then you really break the cell structure and the quality of the beans. So we prefer slow drying in not too hot temperatures. So we use shade, raised beds. We don't want to walk on the coffee and stuff. You want to keep it clean. And then once the coffee is dried down to like 10% moisture, from 50% more or less to 10%, then it's shelf stable. So then you can export it without it really changing. If you only dry it to 13%, you will get a coffee that ages very fast because of microbial
Essentially,
activity.
you want to be able to remove as much water as possible in order to be sure that the shelf life can be extended, so
Yeah.
it can actually be transported.
Yeah.
And that, when I say remove as much water as possible, that line is 10%, you said.
Yeah, I mean, I can accept coffees down even to 8%, but
Right.
below that it becomes difficult to roast.
Right. Okay, I see.
So,
And yes, let's get to the roasting process actually straight away, because that is such an important part. It's not the most important part probably of the quality of a coffee, but it is, because, well, then you'll tell me later on. But
the challenge in coffee that every step is the most important part.
yeah,
Always.
you're right. No, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that, well, there is so much talking about roasting nowadays.
Yeah.
It's massive, the
Yeah.
topic of roasting, and everything else is being forgotten. I understand where you're coming from. I guess my point is, if you work so hard to have a healthy plant, a ripe fruit, basically a high quality raw material,
Yeah.
processed in the best way possible,
Yeah.
and then during the roasting, you roast it too much, or too heavy or too light, and so on, because the roasting process does actually remove some of the aromas present in the raw material.
It
Or
actually
it can emphasize.
okay. So roasting actually creates the aromas because before roasting, the coffee doesn't taste anything like coffee. It tastes like green peas. So during the
Okay, interesting.
roasting process is when you develop the flavors and aromas that we associate with coffee aromas.
Right.
So if you have a very good raw material and a pretty good roaster, it's pretty easy to roast coffee. And there's a big margin of error when I'm doing production cupping, which means quality control every Monday. I just came from that today. I mean, okay, we can score a coffee up or down just based on we have like a baseline where we expect it to be, and we can score it up or down according to our expectations. But we're playing with margins, you know. Uh, you would probably not even notice that
No,
there is any difference. But
for sure I wouldn't.
but yeah, if you roast it way too slow, for instance, with not enough energy, it will basically bake the coffee and make it very dull and flat. If you roast it too fast, it might be unroasted in the middle and burnt on the outside. So it will taste both roasty and green at the same time and astringent. So it's, but you know, you have a lot of room to play within there. So
Right.
roasting for me is more of an expression of a style of the roast master or the company.
Okay.
So uh, if you have really good high quality green beans, it's pretty easy to roast. If you have low quality green beans, pretty difficult to make that taste good, you know, even if you have the best
So
roaster.
there is no, no, of course, of course. So what you're saying is that there is no such a thing as DNA flavor retention.
Yeah, there is for sure. I
There
mean,
is. Okay.
so if I roast a geisha, for instance, I know if it's a high quality geisha from Panama or yeah, then I know what flavors to expect. So I'm looking for citrus, honey,
There you go.
jasmine, and if I don't taste that, that means I need to adjust the roast. Whether I roasted too slow, so all the flavors just faded away, or I roasted too fast, so I didn't really develop the flavors. It was too light, so it just tastes like cereal and peanuts. If it's too dark, it just tastes like burnt charcoal. And it will be the same with the Kenyan coffee. If it doesn't taste like blackcurrant fruit and all these kind of red fruit flavors, then and if I know it's a good quality bean, I've done something wrong in the roast, you know, and then you can adjust. And the way we evaluate this is by cup tasting, and cup tasting is a very simple form of brewing coffee. You basically grind, let's say, in a 200 millimeter or milliliter cup, 2 deciliter cup, you grind 12 grams of coffee in the cup. You just pour boiling water on
Mhm.
top. After 4 minutes, you skim the top, and then you taste with the spoon once the liquid is cool enough. You know, you can't really do anything wrong there, and it's so easy to evaluate. So if you don't taste good flavors in a cupping cup, then it's either poorly roasted coffee or bad quality green coffee. If you start evaluating it as a brewed coffee, then you add the complexity of did I grind it fine enough or coarse enough? Because the cupping process is pretty forgiving when it comes to grind size and everything. So
Right. There is a very stupid question I want to ask you, then we're going to close it. It just came into mind. Now you were talking about temperature, and I want to jump to, the consumer experience, because I think that could be super useful
yeah,
for people listening, actually. Um, and it's a question I ask myself as well. And I don't drink much coffee.
what?
Yeah, that's right. I don't do well with caffeine. The only place I drink coffee, it's yours,
Oh,
actually.
nice. Yeah, thanks.
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. I actually don't drink coffee. But if my girlfriend says, "Let's go have a coffee," then we know we're coming to you.
Nice.
That's it. Uh, is there a temperature where, which for the consumption of coffee, an average cup of coffee, I can't
Mm.
get specific because I'm not an expert, but what temperature is too hot?
To drink?
Yeah.
When you burn yourself, that's too hot.
No,
When you
to
burn your tongue.
experience the aromas to experience the coffee.
Okay, so when a coffee is extremely hot, it's difficult for the body to perceive the flavors. It's kind of like if it's too much chili in your food, you can't really taste anything. It's the same sensation. Also, if it gets too cold, you basically only taste the kind of dark malty flavors. So there's somewhere in between there. Normally, for me, between 40 and 60 degrees it's a big window.
But that's you, right? I was wondering if there is an actual
It's a
temperature range.
pretty universal, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So between 40 and 60, you said.
So
Okay.
most coffee tasters, when you're tasting coffee, uh, with the exception of Japanese people, they like to taste when it's really hot for some reason, probably because of the ramen they are used to
Yeah.
drinking. But they're always the first ones to start tasting in like Cup of Excellence or something. But most coffee tasters will taste the coffee at several stages of temperature. So when it's hot, when it's tempered, and when it's a little bit cooler, but not when it's too hot, of course. And the reason we do this is because the coffee might change over time. You might taste more of a flavor when it cools down or less of it. But normally, the closer to body temperature a beverage is, the more you can taste. Because the body basically doesn't need to react to it. It can just react to the flavors. Also, you have some volatiles, aromas that are kind of evaporating.
Evaporate.
So when it cools down, you have less of these, and some of them have already evaporated as well. So I would say, for me personally, I prefer to drink coffee around 50 degrees, probably around there. And that's when the coffee tastes the most. If it's a bad coffee, you will taste more of bad flavor, and that's a problem.
Right.
So if the coffee is of poor quality, might be a good idea to drink it when it's very hot, because then you taste less of it. If it's a really nice coffee, you can enjoy it all the way down to cool.
Yeah, the problem is that the moment you realize you're experiencing a bad cup of coffee, that's already too late. Unless you don't go back to the barista and say, "Can you warm it up, please?"
Yeah.
And make it warmer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One of my in-laws, or not in-laws. Yeah, my sister's ex-husband.
Right.
He
Right.
heats his coffee in his microwave. I'm pretty sure you
Do you
can
still
do it.
talk to him?
Yeah. I mean, we're good friends, but for me, that's a concept that is a little foreign.
I feel you. It's like putting cream in a carbonara.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Only parmesan and egg, isn't it? And oil.
It's pecorino, actually.
Pecorino.
Pecorino.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways, Tim, if you could change anything about the coffee industry, what would it be?
Then it would be to make the roasters pay more for the coffee. And with the roasters, I mean also the big ones, like Nestle here in Norway, have Johansson, all the big players that are normally buying coffee with future contracts. That has nothing to do with the farmers or anything. It's just about the money transaction. You buy cheap, and the only one who suffers then is the coffee producer. So for me, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. You want the lowest possible price, but you're depending on buying coffee for the future as well. So if you don't pay the producers enough for them to survive, they will stop producing coffee.
That's right.
The only reason why they produce coffee now is because they don't really have a choice. There's not a lot of other cash crops in their area that they can grow.
I mean,
So-
I think you already answered this indirectly, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Are you more money driven or more value driven?
Value driven. I mean, I don't really
If you
care
had to
about
give me
money.
a percentage, what would it be?
I would say, well, you need money to survive, of course, and I have 22 employees that need to have a salary. So for me, it's important that the business makes money, because you also have to be prepared for bad days and everything. But personally, I don't really need money. I don't want a
Do you have a
Ferrari.
supercar?
No, I don't even have a car. You don't need a car in Oslo.
No, you don't need a car
no.
in Oslo, in fact.
No, so for me, I don't have kids. What's important to me is to realize my dreams. And my dream is not to be rich.
Nice to change something and leave a mark.
Yeah, to have a good life. I go to work every day and it doesn't feel like work. I have fun, you know. So
That's such
that's
a
valuable.
cliche sentence, but I know that for some people it's so true because I have been in that position as well. And going to work and it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. I mean, life is too short to not to enjoy it, you know, and to do what you love to do every day. That's the best way to enjoy life, I think.
Have you ever had a cup of coffee and cried for how good it was or how bad it was?
No, but I almost cried last time I was on my farm, because I felt like, you know, I was banging my head against the wall and nothing was changing, and so much work, and I just didn't see any progress. So I didn't cry, but I kind of felt really hopeless. And then I decided to just, okay, let's do something about it. I didn't want to give up, and that's when I decided to contact someone that could help me manage it. So now I have much more hope.
Tim, this was an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, yeah.
I enjoyed this very much, and I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, time flies, so we have a lot to talk about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.